if you look at the examples you brought up before, French Revolution, 30 Years' War, or the English Civil War, and then the Black Death. If you want to look at these kinds of economic crises, you see skyrocketing real estate costs. You see cost of living also skyrocketing. You see um, cost of food and other essentials also skyrocketing. You see stock market bull runs and crashes. You see mass government printing of money, the government going bankrupt from their inability to have a fiscal budget, government bloat. You see, I'm glad that you have a background in economics because I haven't been able to get this detailed in other podcasts. You also see incredible inequality. Uh, you see competition for elite jobs that's very stark, average wages crashing, and you see geopolitical tension and political polarization. And an example people forget is that the average age of marriage has stayed relatively constant over the last 1,000 years of Western history, where before the Black Death, before the 30 Years' War, and before the French Revolution, the average age of marriage was 27, 28. And whenever you hit that range, you're going to have a revolution or a civil war. And I have this whole theory I think you might find interesting that feminism is all backhand, is in some ways largely backhanded cope for people not being able to afford to have families. A woman will be like, oh, uh, I'm a boss babe. I'm just working hard to follow my dreams. And the reason, part of the reason she's saying that is because she legitimately can't afford to start a family. And so it's this backwards rationalization for a decrease in the cost of living. Or she can't afford to have a single income family. So she says, I'm a boss babe to rationalize no longer being in a society where a single man can support a whole family.
I the nature of sort of the cost of living crisis that's going on, and especially for, we're separated by enough that I could almost be your dad, which is funny. It's Dad Saves America after all. One of the reasons why I actually wanted to have you on is you're closer in age to my son than to me. So you've got all this stuff that is hitting your generation that didn't hit me as a Gen Xer.
One of the things you especially would find interesting about my backstory is I've been part of a bunch of weird ecosystems. I formed a social group for influencers in Los Angeles. I've been part of other groups for talented young people. I've been part of conservative groups. So I've been part of several Zoomer groups in the past, and so I've had the real privilege of interviewing dozens of Zoomers across social classes, across region, or hundreds of Zoomers. I've interviewed, depends what you mean by an interview. I've spoken down for like half an hour with basically hundreds of people in my age category and weird ecosystem. I know a lot of people at Harvard. I know people, working class people. I know people in Los Angeles, my hometown in Pennsylvania, Texas. And a very large amount of my analysis comes from speaking to all these different types of Zoomers
Yeah.
because it's this weird cross reference of the population. And actually, the reason I got on the Civil War discourse is that I had enough critical mass talking to Zoomers across every group that I was able to pick up underlying trends. And I basically realized Zoomers of every, even the highest achieving Zoomers had a series of really bad issues. Mental health was one of them.
Yes.
Almost all had financial issues. Almost all of them just did not have the basic things you would need to live a decent life. And so I thought if this many young people are screwed, you're going to have a revolution. And one of the things where I only got on the revolution Civil War discourse, I started in 2020 and it really got kicked into overdrive. This is going to happen soon in 2022 because that was when I'd spoken to enough people where I had pieced together this is the only way that this equation will solve itself. And one of the things I think you would find interesting is that my assessment with what happened to Zoomers is you have all these bureaucratic systems that kept operating longer than anyone involved expected to. And so these things that people think, the way I like to phrase it is that things that people think should be 5% of the equation are the total equation. So DEI hiring is an example. When older people talk about DEI, they're assuming, oh, you have 100 applicants, we're going to increase DEI positions. So let's say 5 out of the 100 will go to diversity people. The current equation is that in the top, I believe, 500 companies, in the job openings since COVID, 95% went
I remember that I don't know if it was Forbes or Inc. It was one of those business magazines that basically touted that exact stat. That's what you're drawing
Yeah,
from,
yeah,
right? It was like, look, post George Floyd
yeah,
2020, the corporate world said we're all in on diversity, and they did it. They did it. It actually happened.
yes.
They did it. Um, what's wrong with that? Why is that bad? I mean, jobs aren't a zero sum game, right?
If something's big enough, it's a cancer. Everything, if it's big enough, is a cancer. Um, where, as Aristotle said, everything pushed to an extreme is evil. And so if it's 95%, that means young white men aren't going to get hired. And
Right.
so you have this,
I've heard this also from people in my age bracket who
yeah,
have gotten to a place where they're just too expensive now. They're actually experienced. They're high
yes,
value, which means that they should earn more money. And it's like, nah.
yeah,
And they've like earned their way into unemployability.
yeah,
I am
exactly.
probably in that category. Were I not entrepreneurial, it'd be like, I don't know where I'd
I
work.
mean,
I'd work in construction would be my choice for personally.
I'd be working a minimum wage job if this channel didn't exist. And so my attitude is if someone gives me an offer, I take it for all it is because you don't get that many offers. And
Is
uh,
this just is this just right wing white male wokeism? What you're saying? This like woe is me, the DEI. I mean, isn't it the case? I want to push on you for a little bit for a couple reasons. First of all, because it's fun, and also because I should, and because I've been an employer for a long time,
yeah,
and maybe it's because I've been a small businessman
yeah,
since I left Viacom. So maybe that's different. I think most people are still working for small businesses. Finding someone that will show up on time,
yeah,
will not ask you about when they're going to get their first day off in their job interview,
yeah,
and the basic decorum of you will probably be a good partner on the team.
yeah,
When you find one of those people, you're like, yes, yes, can you start today? I've literally had this kind of thing. People here have
yes,
had me say, great, can you start tomorrow? Because they meet what in other times would have been relatively basic criteria, like don't ask us about PTO in your job interview.
yeah,
Don't
yes.
ask me when I'm going to pay you to not work, because the answer is you're never going to get paid and you can not work. So that mitigates for me a little bit against what you're saying, like,
Yeah.
oh, woe is me, white young male. Can't you just go get a
So
job? Can't you just go get a job?
my question to you is because you asked a question that's big enough, I could go off for 2 hours about this. Where what evidence would you want me to show you? Would you want to look at demographic information? Would you want me to look at anecdotes? Would you want me to look at statistical data as it relates to quality of life, the school system? It's a whole, you're looking at an ecosystem failure. So it's difficult to pinpoint a single point in the ecosystem where it's, as I said before, it's like 10 bureaucracies failed at once.
So let me lay out a couple things
Yeah.
as part of this, because I think to move into some of the underlying stuff behind your
Yeah.
concern about civil war, I think is what this is about,
Yes.
right? Because and it's so I think where we agree, we probably, having watched about 15 hours of your content, we overwhelmingly agree on things. And I actually think that even when I'm pushing you on, I am skeptical that my worldview has been constructed by statistical work that might not really be good or correct. But the first piece of the puzzle for me is all of that's true. The education system sucks. It's been taken over by commie whack jobs. I talk about that all the time. I don't mince words about it because it's horrible. If you're a parent, pull your kids out of government school and be
Yes.
very careful about the private school because it might be even worse.
Yes. Yes.
So probably homeschool, next up Catholic school, and if you can find the rare school that's not a woke zombie nightmare,
Yeah.
do that, please, for the love of God. That's number one. So I agree completely. I've seen this firsthand. The coddling of the American mind played a big role in my thinking about this, seeing it at the systemic level. Like your generation has come up more anxious, more prone towards suicidality, all those things,
Yeah.
suffering from mental illness in profound ways that I think are very scary and worrisome. All of that's true. But the middle class as defined, it's always like these things like we'll always have the poor if we define the poor as the bottom 10%, right? Like the bottom 10% can be living like kings, but if we define our understanding of the world on the basis of percentages instead of absolute terms, we'll always have the poor. As I understand it, the middle class has shrunk dramatically in this country over the past several decades because it has increasingly become upper middle class. And that the inequality story, as it has been told to us, is actually statistically false. It is a product of media programming. That is not to say there isn't a lot of problems in the society and a lot of people that are living in dire circumstances. I'd like to think, earned my way to a place where I'm reasonably comfortable, but I'm not trying to deny anybody's circumstances. But that's the stuff I have consumed, and it might be maybe it's bullshit. Maybe that's like some phantom. I know, and I don't like to go off on too long of a tangent as an interviewer, but I'll just say this. The past 5 years seems to have changed the game in a couple ways that are pretty profound from my
Yeah.
perspective, one of which being the median cost of housing, which is a bare necessity, has gone into weirdo land where
Yes.
you have to earn six figures to be able to buy a house.
Yes.
So that I can see plainly. The rise in homelessness on the streets in major cities, you can't not see it.
Yes.
So there's a bunch of, it's not like I'm not like a complete blind normie Panglossian Steven
Yes.
Pinker is in my backpack everywhere I go.
Yes.
But I may be closer to that than you. So make your case for
Okay.
why I should throw Steven Pinker in the garbage can.
So I find Stephen Picker funny because he and I basically agree on everything. I still don't like reading his books. I've started like 4 or 5 of his books and finished none of them because he and I are such different animals in the ecosystem. Where I read the stuff he says and I'm like, I factually agree with what you're saying. I agree. I think you're a smart guy. I think you're honest. But I still dislike this, where his whole thing of there are more toilets in Africa, thus progress has happened, and that thus the struggles of normal Americans today are fine. I just want to throw that book in the trash. And so I'll start with here. I'll tell you, and we're friends outside of this, and you've seen I'm a pretty industrious person, pretty hardworking, and that sort of thing. And I can tell you why if I didn't have this channel, I would try not to have a job at all. So let's look at it through this lens. So let's say I work a normal job for someone my age. Let's say I make $10 an hour. An appetizer is can be $14. So you work 7 hours. Um, then the appetizer, then $70. A dinner is often $50. So that's just covering food. And if you look at the statistics, you find basically 75% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. So they're paying off the money they have now just to work more, just to work again and to keep doing it. And the numbers I find most telling are, first of all, that the first of all, 40% of Americans don't have $400 in the bank. 70% of Americans don't have $1,000 in the bank. People are lying about these numbers. These are not numbers you can expect people to tell the truth about. And so that's one thing. And when I was a teenager, I made the calculation, if I don't become an entrepreneur, I'm screwed. Because my mom ran a brewery and I worked at the brewery and I would talk to other people at the brewery and they
Mm-hmm.
would grumble at how the job market was terrible and money wasn't worth anything and that stuff. And also, I'd go to school and we were working like people in my class did stuff they did various forms of class for like over 12 hours a day. And I hated that. I was really disaffected in school. And I saw that everyone's working. They said, you're going to go to college. After college, you're going to get a job. And I was looking around and I thought, where are the jobs? Because I didn't really what what industry sucks up these people out of college?
So my you can make like 100 grand driving a truck.
Yeah.
Like today. Like you can go
Yeah, yeah.
there's something like I don't know what the number is right now. And again, even you look at the current revisions of the FBI statistics, and trusting any government stats
Yeah.
needs a gigantic asterisk on it.
Yes.
But there are jobs.
It's
There are jobs that may pay pretty well. A lot of them are physical. Some of them are not physical.
yeah.
But there are a lot of people working. You know, we said earlier in the conversation, right? Even in the Great Depression, 75% of people were working.
Yes, yes.
So, uh,
It's an ecosystem failure. That's what I keep saying because we can.
but that's a little bit like socializing
I
the
can explain.
analysis.
I can.
So connect the dots for me.
Okay, so let's go through the ecosystem failure. The purpose of a person's life is, or the things people need to have in life to not feel like failures are gainful employment,
Mm-hmm.
housing, a mate, ability to support children, some kind of value system, and
Yes.
friends.
Yeah.
This is the bare minimum that even someone in Egypt or the Congo would think that's what a person needs to have a decent life.
If you like this clip, you should check out the full video and all the other great content we've got at Dad Saves America. So be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and ring that bell so you won't miss our new stuff as it drops each week.